Hey, what's up, Facebook? So, I got some new equipment, man. I got a microphone here. I got a new camera, light. So, I I wanted to kind of start going live and start talking about real estate and fielding some questions and stuff. So, first and foremost, I want to talk about how to negotiate, right? I actually was just working with a student today who's in the middle of a deal and who's negotiating and was actually able to negotiate the asking price down while already under contract, which is super important to understand because there's a couple of facets to this, right? So first and foremost, a lot of people think that negotiating is just talking somebody down. When the truth is that's not negotiating, because true negotiating is looking for win-win situations for both you and the seller or the buyer, depends on which side of the transaction you're on. So, when most folks think, oh, just talking somebody down is negotiating, a lot of times that comes from not being educated on the value of the particular item. Like sometimes we'll look at deals and we don't have to negotiate because it's already a good price. And we know that trying to go in and maybe get a lower price or negotiate is more often than not going to make us lose the deal, right? And that kind of comes down to knowing, is it a good deal or not before you even step into it. But what I wanted to talk about here, and again, I'll open up, like if you have any questions, hit me in the comments there, whether it's related to negotiating or real estate in general. I'll field your questions, kind of while we're on here live, and I'll follow the comments after I go off. But so what most people think is, again, is just trying to talk somebody down or get a cheaper price, X, Y, Z, and that's not really negotiating, right? Negotiating is finding value and finding where you can add value and create valuable situations for both yourself and the buyer or the seller, depending on, where you are in the transaction. So the situation that my student was in is they're under contract and the asking price was $100,000. They were under contract for the $100,000 as it was a good deal at that price point. Only needs about $30,000 worth of work, probably a little bit less because the student, they're actually going to be doing some of the work themselves. So during the inspection phase, which we're in right now, they kind of found a couple of things that that kind of could potentially cost them more money, maybe not. But the truth is, there are things that we know that we can leverage to the seller to potentially negotiate, right? And there's a key in this piece here, right? And I teach all of my students that negotiation is most effective when you're already under contract. And here's why. Once you're under contract, right, it's important to understand that there's emotions that are attached to that, right, Robin? What's happening? And when you're under contract, right, you need to understand that the seller on the other side of that is a human being that has emotions and that's affected by emotions. And there's things that come with that, right? When somebody is already under contract, mentally, they're already thinking about the sale, the money that's going to come in, the proceeds from that transaction. And so your ability to negotiate rises dramatically once you're under contract. A lot of newbie investors and folks that haven't really done many deals try to negotiate on the front end. Well, there's not a lot of motivation from the seller to negotiate with you because they can just move on to the next potential buyer. There's no commitment. Once you're under contract now, that seller is feeling the transaction already done, right? Like they're already emotionally invested in that transaction. So your odds of being able to negotiate when you have proper leverage point, which I'm going to talk about in a second, your ability to negotiate significantly increase because the person is emotionally invested in the transaction going to fruition, right? So this particular student, they're under contract, and during the inspection phase, we found a couple of items that really aren't a big deal, but they're things that I know that we can potentially utilize to negotiate the price a little bit further, which is always a win for us, right? Combine that with what's happening in the market, right? And this is important. This is where it's really important for you as an investor or maybe somebody who hasn't invested yet. And if you haven't and you're looking on the sidelines, you definitely should reach out because one of the most valuable things I think my students get is the ability in real time to have access to me during negotiation or when a seller counters or when inspections arise. When things happen, they get instant access to ask me questions. How do I handle this? What should I do? How should I respond? They countered with this. What should we say? And they get my my response and my advice immediately so they're not paralyzed, which keeps them into action and keeps them moving forward with deals. So this particular student, we're under contract, asking price is $100,000 or under contract for $100,000, and some things popped up in the inspection that weren't necessarily big deals, but they were the kind of items that we know, hey, we could go back to the seller and potentially negotiate. So we went back to the seller and we negotiated. And when I told the student, I said, here's what I want you to do. I want you to go, and instead of just asking for the seller, here's the secret, right? If you're doing real estate deals, what I'm going to share with you could literally transform how you negotiate deals and how you close deals. And if you do this the right way, and I've done this on deals before, if you do this way, this could literally mean you bringing no money into the deal. Let me explain. So when you go back to negotiate with a seller, instead of just asking from them to, let's say $15,000 is what you're looking for, right? Let's say you're looking for them to negotiate $15,000 off the sale price, right? So they're asking $100,000 is the price. We're looking for that seller to come down to $85,000, right? Most people think, okay, let's just get them to go from a sale price of $100,000 down to $85,000. Well, I found that in doing deals, one of the reasons that that's not usually the best idea is here's why. When you're negotiating real estate, right, your realtor, for the most part, who's representing you, is going to have to go to the other agent and say, hey, my buyer is interested in, reducing the price from $100,000 to $85,000 for these particular reasons. Well, you have to think about that other agent, right, and their motivations. Now, if that agent is getting the price negotiated from $100,000 down to $85,000, what just happened to their commission? It just got a little bit smaller, right? So 3% of $15,000 is what? Is like $500-600, which maybe not is a huge amount of money. If they're making 6%, you're looking at $1,000-1,200, but that is where they make their money, right? They're not getting paid to show the house; they're only getting paid when that property closes. So if they're, from the realtor perspective, who represents the seller, from their angle, for them to go back to the seller and negotiate the price down immediately means they're negotiating their own commission to be smaller. Why would they be motivated to do that? Most people don't think that way. They don't think about the seller side of things. They don't think about the realtor and the person that's going to actually be the one who's going to need to go to bat for you. And so here's what we do to create a win-win situation, because we realize that agent, the seller's agent, is going to be the one who's going to have to go to the seller, represent us, and present our new offer to them. And we know that that's kind of a conflict of interest for him, because he's going to be trying to talk his own commission down to a smaller amount of money, which, why would he be motivated to do that? So here's what you do instead, and this is a win-win across the board. And if you do this correctly, I've done this where we were originally supposed to bring like $25,000 to close a deal. I wound up bringing less than $4,000 because we did this the right way. And I had a student do the same thing. He was supposed to bring like $26,000 to close. He wound up bringing like $10,000 because he did this the right way. Here's what you do. Instead of asking the seller to drop the price of the home from $100,000 down to $85,000, you ask the seller to give you a seller credit of $15,000. How does that make the transaction different? I will explain. So instead of just knocking the price from $100,000 down to $85,000, which would reduce the commission on the agent and would really only save you, if you're bringing 10% to the deal, 10% of $15,000 would really only save you $1,500 out of pocket. Not really a big deal, right? If the seller gives you a seller credit of $15,000, number one, that property is still selling for $100,000, which means the agent still gets his commission on the original price, which inclines him to still be willing to negotiate for you because he wants to close that transaction, and he's able to negotiate that new price without cutting out his own commission or making his commission smaller. So he's motivated. Number two, and why it's more beneficial for you, is because a $15,000 seller credit is significantly different on the HUD statement than $15,000 in the reduced price. Here's why. that $15,000 seller credit is going to look like cash that you're bringing to the deal. So if you had to bring, let's say, $20,000 to close that deal at a $100,000 sales price, now you get a $15,000 seller credit. That looks like you've already brought $15,000. Now your cash to close went from $20,000 down to $5,000. This is how you can creatively close deals with little to none of your money. And there's tons of things that we do in creative ways that we can structure deals to bring little to none of our own money into the deal. Lots of ways. This is just one way. But it creates a win-win for both you, for the seller's agent, and for the seller, because especially now in a market right now where things are starting to cool off, interest rates are rising a little bit, deals are a little bit harder to close for the average investor. Sellers know that, right? So they're a little bit more inclined to negotiate. They're a little bit more inclined to work with you. Use it to your benefit. So in the case of my student this morning, yesterday we said, we were trying to negotiate down to $90,000 from the $100,000 price point. It's still a good deal at $100,000. I want you to understand that. But we have leverage points, and we want to use those leverage points to our benefit if we can. So I told the student, I said, go back and ask them to come down to $85,000. Here's why. If we're trying to get to around 90, even 95 would have been good. We don't want to start there because we want to give some space for them to counter, then us to counter back, right? So he sends to the agent, he says, hey, let's ask for a seller credit of $15,000, bringing us down to $85,000, ultimately the closing price. Another reason why this works is because we know the house will appraise, which this is important. We know the house will appraise as is for at least $100,000, so the lender's going to have no problem funding the deal at $100,000. John, I appreciate you, man. And, we know that we're not going to have any problem with the lender lending at $100,000 price point. So the seller credit works incredibly well. So last night, the student sends in the offer, and the seller gets back and says, hey, we're gonna think it over. We'll let you know tomorrow. This morning, I get a text that says the seller countered at $95,000. So we've already got him to move from $100,000 to $95,000 on a seller credit, which is $5,000 back in my student's pocket that he doesn't have to bring to close. Now, here's why it's genius and why I'm sharing this and why the student is so incredibly excited about it. Because he already knew that this was a good deal at $100,000, right? This is just $5,000 in bonus money, which is a big deal because it's $5,000 in his pocket. $5,000 less he's going to bring to close the deal is still a good deal. But we didn't accept that. We didn't say, okay, $95,000 is. I said, okay, counter at $92,000. $8,000 seller credit. He countered at $92,000. We're waiting to hear back. The seller's going to take it because the market is shifting, right? And he's already under contract. And we know that the seller realizes that if I have to back out of this deal over $2,000 or $3,000, $5,000, $8,000, right? What does that mean? I'm going to have to put it back in the market. I'm going to have to hope we get another buyer. We're going to have to wait. Nobody on the planet can close this deal faster than my student who's already under contract. The seller knows that. We tell the seller that. We tell the agent that, listen, my guy can close this deal faster than anybody else. Let's not lose this over $2,000 or $3,000. But these are leverage points that we know, right? And we know that we can use these because of the market, because of the inspection, because of some things that we've seen, and we can go back. Ultimately, I told the student, listen, if they counter and they're immovable, don't worry about it. We're going to close it at $100,000. Still a good deal, right? So I wanted to share that with you guys because these are like some of the little insider secrets and things that I share with my students when we're working and when they get deals under contract. We look at these deals and we look for where there's leverage points. We look at the listing. Like there's a lot of things. Every property is like its own standalone business, right? Every property has its own story. There's data. There's things that surround every property that tell us, when we know what to look for, where our leverage points are, where we can negotiate, where we should be with the price, the motivations of the seller, all of these things. And we use those things to our benefit to lock in good deals at the end of the day, right? Because what's happening right now in the market and with the recession, even though they shifted the definition and then now they're saying we're under a recession, whatever, is that there are going to be incredibly amazing deals that are going to come across the board. And you need to be trained to see, to spot, to recognize. Shannon, I appreciate you, man. I'm looking at the comments over here. a trained eye will recognize those deals, right? Because right now we're not just looking for good deals, right? We're looking for great deals, deals that are in areas that are going to appreciate. Because as my mentor always says, right, even though property prices may adjust, they may flatten, we might be in a recession, what's not going to change and what's actually going up is rent prices, which means we will be able to buy those deals and hold on to them because rent is going to allow us to cash flow, hold on to those deals while appreciation and all the other insanely awesome benefits of real estate happen over time on our behalf. So right now is a super sweet time to buy properties. And if you don't know what to do, if you have questions, if you don't know how to get started, that's why I'm here. And it's only going to get better. You're absolutely right, John. And it's going to get better, right? And if you're watching this, and if you've been sitting on the sideline, what I learned before I even got started in real estate, what I learned and what all of my students have shared with me is that what has kept them out of the game is their brains think they need to learn more than they need to learn, or they need more information, right? People soak up podcasts and books and courses and stuff, but they don't get into action. And when I work with my students, that is the number one thing that we do differently is I'm not just teaching you. Like everything I'm doing, we're getting you into action, and there's an action plan, and then we're following up. So it's more, I like to say it's not just coaching and training, but it's implementation oversight, right? Like I'm overseeing you implementing, taking steps, taking action, and doing things. And as you're doing those things, we're adjusting, we're making moves in between our calls. I'm answering questions to ensure that they're continuing moving forward, right? And that's important because you're not going to get wealthy watching from the sideline. You're not going to get wealthy in real estate reading books. You're not going to get wealthy in real estate listening to podcasts, taking courses, right? Those things are good and they have their place, but that's not what's going to put money in your bank account. It's what's not going to make your kids millionaire, and it's what's not going to build a legacy. Getting out there, taking action, and implementing is. And I think that's one of the biggest things that I really push with my students is getting them into action. And that's why almost every single student that has worked with me has closed their first deal in 90 days or less. And a lot of them are in less than 6 months are on their second deal, moving on, and they're building wealth because we get them into action. So before I hop off, I want to see if any of you guys that are watching or listening have any questions. If you catch this recording later on, if you pop your questions in, I will answer those questions. I'm actually getting ready to go. I'm taking the kids tonight and Robin to see the Kid Laroi. I don't know if you're a music fan or whatnot, but I'm gonna get my youngster, my young man on tonight. I'm gonna be hanging out. Who knows if I'm gonna be the oldest dude in the House of Blues in Orlando tonight? I don't know, but we'll find out. But I'm definitely gonna be hanging out and enjoying some Kid Laroi music. But if you catch this later, post your questions. If you're listening now, I will answer your questions. Anything that pertains to real estate, hit me up. And I'm going to be doing a lot more of these. I just started a YouTube channel as well. I'm going to be sharing some videos, tips. There's so many small things that you learn about real estate as you start taking action, as you start implementing, as you start doing things. And I want to share those, right, as we're going. Have I been looking at any commercial? When you say commercial, John, do you mean like retail strip malls, or do you mean 5 units or more, like multifamily? I'll give you a chance to answer that. All right, we could be lagged. So, if you're speaking of retail commercial, no, I have not. But multifamily, yeah, of course. That's the end game, right? That's my goal is by the end of the year. I already own some multifamily myself. I got some 4 units and some smaller multifamily. But from the commercial perspective, 5 units and higher is definitely the goal. I would like to do at least a 12 or maybe a 24 unit before the year's done. I'm starting to look now. The process and the path is a little bit different than single family. So for me, my goal had been to build a resume of single family where lenders could see that I have a solid track record of being able to go in, acquire for X, inject Y, and make the property worth, there's like a 15-second delay, make the property worth, significantly more, and be able to do that over and over and over and over again to the point where lenders are literally willing to just hand me money because they see that I have a proven track record of being able to multiply capital with real estate. So that's the name of the game, and that's where I'm at now. Now I'm just kind of looking for a deal. So I don't know what part of Florida you're in, but if some deals come across your desk or whatnot, and you want to talk about it, dude, we can totally talk about it. Multifamily for me is where you want to be because it's exponential at that point. When you start dealing with cap rates, like things just get ridiculous, man. Like the ability to just multiply money and make significantly more because everything is exponentially multiplied by using a cap rate, right? Like for instance, if we take an 8-unit building, right? I'll do some math real quick. An 8-unit building, which is probably like the brink of being in commercial, right? 5 units is technically considered commercial, but I don't usually see 5 units. Usually they're 8 units, 12 units, usually in multiples of that. But let's take an 8-unit, right? Let's say I'm looking at an 8-unit and I know that we can raise the rent by $200. $200 rent raise on an 8-unit building does this to the value and the equity on that building. So you take 200 times your 8 units, right? It means you're adding $1,600 in rent to the NOI monthly. So you have $1,600 times your 12 months is $19,200 that you would be adding to the NOI, which is the net operating income of that building. Now you multiply that by a vacancy, which we usually do like 95%, because you might have some turnover and stuff. So $19,200 times 95% leaves us with $18,240 added to the NOI on that building, which is again your net operating income. Divide that by a standard 6.5% cap rate, which is 0.065. This is how much value you would have added to that building by raising the rent $200 a month. And you can typically do that on 8 units. I can do that for probably between $70,000 and $85,000. So 70 to, let's say it's 85, let's say high end. $85,000 in capital injected into an 8-unit building would return me $280,000 in equity. Do you know what that is in cash on cash return, dude? 285,000 divided by 280,000 is a almost 31% return on equity. That's why multifamily is the goal for me, and that's why we're getting there. And it's understanding steps, right? Like I shared a post the other day where I was just talking about, that real estate was always the goal. For us, Robin and I, for 15 years, even when I was in prison, we talked about real estate always being the goal because we know our skill sets and we know our passion and what we enjoy doing. And we knew real estate was where we wanted to be. And, in the early days, we had immediate needs, that needed to be taken care of. But we knew that we needed to build some skills and do some things and position ourselves. And so for me right now, real estate is like my all in. Like this is where I want to be. My kids will be millionaires by the time they're teenagers. They're learning the game as well. And, retirement, real estate is it, right? Like I don't swing hammers. I literally just show up to the jobs and I just point. I stick blue tape. I say, good job, love that, great tile, fix that, move that, awesome. Can we do this? And then I leave and just significantly build while doing it. So multifamily is definitely the name of the game, where you want to be. There's just so much about it. Maybe I'll do a separate live about that. But if you have any questions, let me know. I'm getting ready to hop off here. I got to get ready to go eat, man, and I'm taking Robin and the kids. We're going to see the Kid Leroy tonight. I think it's going to be a pretty awesome experience. But I'm going to start doing these lives more often. I literally just set up this whole studio. I bought a new Mac. I got a light going. I got a